Part 1. Born of Broken Dreams, Los Angeles, 1974. 1986. The first sound Leonardo heard wasn't the lull of a mother's lullaby or the hum of a sterile hospital machine. It was the fierce crash of the Pacific, some 8 miles west of downtown Los Angeles, as if the ocean itself was roaring his name. He was born on November 11, 1974, in East Hollywood, beneath the watchful glare of the broken dreams of actors, artists, and immigrants, all packed into a world that shimmered with false light. His mother, Ermeline, clutched his slick body to her chest with the kind of desperation known only to women who've crossed oceans for something better. She had left Germany in her early 20s, chasing hope in a country that sold it wholesale and cheap. His father, George, stood at her side with a ragged beard and ink-stained fingers, a comic book tucked under one arm. He named his son Leonardo because Ermeline said she felt him kick for the first time while admiring a Da Vinci painting in the Uffizi Gallery. But it was more than that. George believed in symbols. And what better way to arm a boy against the world than with the name of a genius? They loved him instantly. Fiercely. But not each other. Within a year, their marriage buckled under the weight of creative ambition and financial ruin. George wanted to roam, to draw, to dream. Ermeline wanted to build something solid. A life. A home. A future. They separated, but never drifted far. Literally. George moved just down the block. A child caught in the middle, Leonardo grew up walking between 2 apartments and 2 realities. His mother's world of quiet discipline and survival, and his father's freewheeling den of ideas, incense, and bohemian chaos. By the time he was 5, Leonardo had learned 3 unspoken truths. Love could live after marriage died. Money was always almost enough. He would never be normal, and maybe that was okay. His childhood unfolded like a movie shot on a cracked lens. There were rats in the alleys and addicts on the corners. Prostitutes smiled at him like aunties. He rode in a beat-up Toyota with broken windows, his mother clutching the wheel and whispering German curses under her breath when the engine coughed. They passed Hollywood Boulevard every day, a street lined with stars, but reeking of piss. At home, he was Leo, a restless, bright-eyed boy with an energy that could melt glass. His mother worked long hours as a legal secretary. At night, she would return home with blistered feet and an exhausted smile, always making time to read to him. She fed him stories of strength and reinvention, heroes who rose from ruin, kings who were once beggars. "You can do anything," she'd whisper, brushing his blonde hair back. "Anything, Leo." But Leo didn't want to be just anything. He wanted to be everything. At school, he didn't fit in. He was too loud, too weird, too much. He acted out, made strange noises in class, invented stories that scared the other kids. Teachers labeled him disruptive. But inside, Leo was screaming to be seen. His only peace came through pretending. He would stand in front of the mirror and become anyone, an astronaut, a gangster, a one-legged pirate sobbing over lost love. George saw it and recognized it instantly. "You're an actor," George said one night. "You've got that madness in your eyes." So George took him to underground art shows, poetry readings, and midnight screenings. Ermeline, terrified but trusting, agreed to let him audition. But Hollywood didn't open its doors easily. He was too quirky. Too raw. Too real. At one audition, a casting agent glanced at his resume and wrinkled her nose. "Leonardo DiCaprio? That's a mouthful. You should change it, something shorter. Lenny D, maybe?" Leo clenched his fists. "No. That's my name." Ermeline stood behind him, silent, proud. Their apartment sat in the belly of Hollywood's beast, near Western and Franklin, where the sidewalks were stained with spit and secrets. Every day was a survival game: check the rent, chase a gig, dodge eviction. Leo watched his mother go without dinner more than once so he could eat. He knew struggle, but he also knew love, and in between the struggle, there were miracles. A commercial here. A small role there. Enough to keep the lights on. Enough to dream. But fame still felt like a distant galaxy. And Leo, for all his brightness, was still just a boy orbiting the edges of it, Then came the heartbreak. Leo's first big audition for a sitcom came when he was 11. He was nervous, sweating in a second-hand suit. He nailed the lines, made the room laugh, but they gave the part to another kid, more polished, more all-American. Leo sat outside on the curb, staring at the traffic, feeling invisible. "I'm never gonna make it," he told his mom. Ermeline knelt down beside him, her voice fierce and gentle. "You will. They just don't know who you are yet." Those words stayed with him, echoed louder than the rejection. By 13, Leo's world was speeding up. He was taller now, his face sharper, his eyes still wild. A new agent saw something in him, something unpredictable and electric. She sent him to bigger auditions. Real auditions. He landed a guest role on a soap opera, then a cereal commercial, then a pilot for a news show. Each gig brought more attention, more pressure, but also more temptation. Leo was drawn to danger the way moths chase flame. At night, he'd sneak out with older kids, explore abandoned buildings, drink behind corner stores. He liked the edge, the thrill of almost falling. But something always pulled him back: his mother's faith, his father's eccentric wisdom, the voice inside him that said, "You're meant for more." Then came the call that would change everything. His agent phoned. "You got the audition. This Boy's Life. With Robert De Niro. It's down to 5 kids, and you're one of them." Leo's breath caught in his throat. He had read the script, a brutal, aching story about a boy and his abusive stepfather. It was dark, real, raw. It terrified him, and he wanted it more than anything. The final audition was brutal. De Niro himself was in the room, sitting like a stone Buddha, watching, waiting. At one point, De Niro threw a chair across the room and screamed at him in character. Leo screamed back. Silence followed. Then De Niro looked at the director and said, "That's the kid." The role would launch him. But that night, Leo didn't celebrate. He sat in his room, alone, staring at the ceiling. Outside, sirens wailed. A couple fought in the alley. Somewhere nearby, a gunshot echoed. But inside, Leo DiCaprio felt something settle in his bones. Destiny, maybe. Or madness. The boy from East Hollywood, the son of an immigrant and an artist, the kid who refused to change his name, was about to walk through the gates of a world that had broken better men. He didn't know it yet, but the price of greatness would be everything, and he was willing to pay. Part 2. The Boy in Front of the Camera. Los Angeles, 1990. 1993. The first time Leonardo stepped onto a real soundstage, he felt like he was walking into a dream someone else had scripted. It was too bright, too artificial. The laughter from the studio audience was pumped in through speakers. Even the coffee on set smelled fake, like plastic trying to impersonate warmth. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the red light blinking on the camera, the line in the script with his name above it, and the quiet hum inside his chest that whispered, "This is a." He was 16, wiry and all elbows, with a grin too big for his face and a voice still figuring out how deep it wanted to be. He was cast in a sitcom. Growing Pains. Just a few episodes. A replacement kid, a tag-on to juice ratings. He played Luke, an orphan taken in by a wealthy suburban family. It wasn't his dream role, not even close. But it was steady work, a paycheck, and a step into the machine. And the machine was hungry. The mornings started early. 5 a.m. wake-up calls. Cold cereal. Long drives with his mom through smog-thick LA streets. Leo would rub sleep from his eyes in the car, lines running through his head like prayers. Ermeline sat beside him, coffee in one hand, hope in the other. She was his anchor. "Always. I'll wait outside," she'd say at the studio lot, knowing how much he hated looking like a baby with his mom still tagging along. But she never left. She just waited in the parking lot, flipping through German newspapers, her eyes always on the gate. He hated sitcom acting. The laugh track, the forced jokes, the rehearsals that squeezed spontaneity out of every line. The other actors were nice but hollow, their smiles as polished as the marble floors in the network's lobby. He wanted to scream during rehearsals. "Where's the truth in this? Where's the fire?" But he did it. Smiled. Hit his marks. Got the laughs. And then he'd go home, throw the script across the room, and act out monologues from Scorsese films in the mirror, spitting out raging bull lines like gospel. He'd stay up late reading plays, Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller, Sam Shepard, whispering their words into the night like secrets. "I don't want to be a TV star," he said once to Ermelin. "I want to disappear into a role. Lose myself. Become someone else." She touched his face gently. "Then don't stop until you do." Hollywood didn't care about disappearing acts. It wanted faces, smiles, bankability. And Leo? He was marketable now that he'd been featured in Tiger Beat. Girls wrote letters. Dozens a day. Some slipped phone numbers into their fan mail. Others sent photos, lipstick kisses, even underwear. The producers loved it. "Leo's got the look," they said. "That shaggy hair. That smirk. He could be the next River Phoenix." River Phoenix. The name echoed through him like a warning bell. Leo admired River. Watched Stand By Me until the VHS warped. There was truth in that boy, pain behind his eyes. But River was falling fast. Drugs, clubs, late nights at the Viper Room. Leo saw the path laid out for him like a trap. The fame machine wanted to make him a teen idol, then chew him up. Use him. Burn him. He had no intention of becoming a tragedy. Then came this boy's life. The script landed on his doorstep like a thunderbolt. A young boy. A broken mother. A cruel, manipulative stepfather. Pain, rage, survival. It was messy. Unflinching. Real. And Robert De Niro was attached. Leo read the pages in a single sitting, his hands trembling. Tobias Wolff, the boy in the story, felt like a version of him. Not identical, but close enough that he could smell the anger in the scenes. His audition was intense. De Niro watched him with those heavy, unblinking eyes. At one point, Leo shouted so hard his voice cracked. He thought he'd blown it, but 2 weeks later, his agent called. "You got it. You're playing Toby." Leo didn't believe it until he walked onto set and saw De Niro smoking quietly in a folding chair, nodding at him. That nod meant everything. The shoot changed him. De Niro was merciless. In the best way. He didn't coddle. Didn't coach. He'd bark at Leo in character, push him, provoke him. "Don't act," De Niro said one day. "React." So Leo did. He dropped the tricks. The techniques. He let the emotions hit him like waves: fear, confusion, defiance, fury. There was one scene, a confrontation in the kitchen, Leo screaming at De Niro, shoving him. The first take was decent. The second better. The third, Leo collapsed in tears. Raw, gasping sobs that clawed out of him like demons. Not just acting. Not just the character. Something deeper. Something personal. Years of buried rage. The kind he never showed anyone, not even his mother. The room went silent. De Niro nodded. "That's it," he said, the film wrapped. The critics raved. Overnight, Leo transformed from a sitcom kid to Hollywood's newest obsession. Suddenly everyone wanted him. Agents. Publicists. Studio execs. Scripts flooded in. Bad boy number 3. Cool kid in crisis. Teen heartthrob. One producer offered him a 3-picture deal on the spot, 7 figures, just to flash a smile and sell popcorn. He turned it down. "I don't want to play pretty," he said. He wanted grit. Depth. Sold. So he chose a different path. What's Eating Gilbert Grape? The role was risky. Arnie Grape, a mentally disabled teen in a small town. A character that could easily become a caricature in the wrong hands. Leo dove in headfirst. He visited group homes. Spoke to mental health experts. Spent weeks observing boys with developmental disorders. He studied their tics, their body language, their unpredictability. Then he let it all go and became Arnie. On set, he stayed in character. He twitched, muttered, wandered. Johnny Depp, his co-star, watched in awe. "He's not acting," Depp told a crew member. "He's living it." And it wasn't just for show. Leo felt Arnie. Understood his loneliness, his joy, his fear. Because somewhere inside, Leo was still that kid from East Hollywood who didn't quite fit, who didn't speak the same language as the world around him. The movie premiered. Critics lost their minds. Who is this kid? Genius! Unforgettable. He earned his first Academy Award nomination. 19 years old. But the night of the Oscars, he felt like an imposter. The tuxedo felt like a costume. The limo ride made his stomach turn. As he sat in the Dolby Theater, surrounded by legends, his heart pounded. He didn't win. He didn't expect to. But as the applause faded and the cameras turned away, Leo didn't feel disappointment. He felt relief. Because the truth was, the fame was terrifying. The camera flashbulbs. The whispers. The magazine headlines. All of it was swallowing him whole. He escaped to New York. Disappeared into the village for a while. Grew a beard. Smoked too much. Wandered bookstores. Avoided paparazzi. One night, in a bar in the East Village, a stranger recognized him. Not as Arnie. Not as Luke. Just as that kid with the weird name. The man laughed. DiCaprio? Sounds like a pasta dish. Leo laughed too. For the first time in weeks, that night, he called his mother. I don't know if I can do this forever, he said. Ermeline didn't panic. Didn't pressure, she just said. Then don't. Just do it until it stops being true. Leo hung up and stared out the window, and for the first time, he wondered what kind of man he'd become if he wasn't famous. But he didn't have the answer yet. All he knew was this: the camera was still on him. And he wasn't done telling stories. Not yet. Part 3. The Brilliant Misfit. Los Angeles, New York, Hollywood, 1994 to 1997. The trouble with standing out was that it made blending in impossible. By 20, Leonardo DiCaprio had tasted what most actors spent lifetimes chasing: fame, critical praise, and the haunting weight of potential. He was no longer just a child actor or a lucky kid from Growing Pains. He was something else now. A mystery to some, a threat to others. A misfit in the middle of a golden spotlight. But Leo didn't want gold. He wanted the truth. And that made him dangerous in a town built on illusion. It was the spring of 1994, and the buzz from What's Eating Gilbert Grape was still electric. Directors sent scripts by the dozens. Studio heads left messages like suitors begging for a dance. But Leo said no more than he said yes. He wasn't interested in formula films or safe roles. He wasn't chasing the dollar. He wanted madness. He wanted complexity. He wanted to disappear into something that made people uncomfortable. So he took roles that didn't make sense to most people. First came The Quick and the Dead, a stylized western directed by Sam Raimi. Leo played the kid, a cocky sharpshooter desperate for the approval of his father, played by Gene Hackman. The film flopped at the box office. Critics dismissed it as gimmicky. But Leo didn't care. Then came The Basketball Diaries. The script was a bomb, volatile, unflinching, and filled with darkness. Based on Jim Carroll's real-life memoir, it followed a gifted teenager's descent into heroin addiction, theft, and violence. Hollywood execs warned him. "This will ruin your image," they said. "You'll scare the teenage fan base." He signed on the spot, and what followed was a descent into a role so raw it nearly tore him apart. Leo threw himself into research. He visited rehab centers, interviewed addicts, walked through alleys behind convenience stores, studied the desperate rituals of junkies, the hollow eyes, the trembling hands, the lies they told themselves just to survive another day. The filming was brutal. Cold nights in alleyways. Endless takes of withdrawal scenes, his body convulsing, voice cracking. The most harrowing moment, a breakdown in a bathroom, Leo crying out to his mother for help, real tears, born from something deep inside. When the cameras stopped, the crew went quiet. Some had to step outside. The movie didn't make much money, but it made people see. And it made Leo something rare in Hollywood, a beautiful boy who could terrify you. But Leo couldn't escape the orbit of Hollywood's dream machine forever. He was still on magazine covers. Still chased by paparazzi. Still seen as a commodity. There was one night, a party in the hills. Someone handed him a drink. Then another. Then a girl he didn't know took his hand and pulled him onto a balcony overlooking Los Angeles. "This is your city now," she whispered, pressing her lips to his ear. "You can own it." He pulled away. Something about her voice didn't feel real. "This city doesn't belong to anyone," he said. "It just pretends to." The offers kept coming. Bigger, flashier, more commercial. Then came Romeo and Juliet, Baz Luhrmann's wild, reckless reimagining of Shakespeare's classic. Set in Verona Beach, drenched in neon, pulsing with violence and beauty, Leo was skeptical. "Shakespeare?" he laughed. "In Hawaiian shirts?" But then he read the script. The poetry. The madness. The love that burned too hot to last. He was in. The production was chaos. Fast. Frantic. Feverish. Luhrmann pushed his cast to the brink, demanding not just performance, but transcendence. Leo and Claire Danes, as Juliet, became co-conspirators in an artistic experiment that could have failed spectacularly. It didn't. When the film premiered in 1996, teenage girls screamed. Critics scratched their heads. And Leo became something he never asked to be, a star. That word, it made his skin crawl. Star meant shiny, polished, flawless. Leo was cracked porcelain, full of contradictions. He still lived like a misfit. Messy apartments, late-night diners, torn jeans. He hated limos. Avoided interviews. Mocked the red carpet with ironic grins. And yet, his face was everywhere. Billboards. Magazines. Even Times Square. He was beautiful. That was the problem. People projected fantasies onto him. Called him the next James Dean. Teenage girls wrote poetry about his eyes. Fashion brands offered millions. But beneath the surface, Leo wrestled with the weight of expectation. Every smile felt like a lie. Every role, a battleground between authenticity and perception. He once told a friend, "I want to be ugly in a movie. I want to be unwatchable. Then maybe they'll see the real me." The real him was restless. And then came the movie that would both immortalize and almost destroy him, Titanic. The script was a monster, 3 hours long, melodramatic, ambitious. James Cameron was known for obsession. The budget was ballooning. People whispered it would be a disaster. Leo read the script and didn't want it. "It's a love story," he told his agent. "I don't want to be a heartthrob." Cameron fought for him. He saw something deeper, a soul behind the eyes. A vulnerability that couldn't be taught. Kate Winslet signed on as Rose. She called Leo before the first table read. "Are you ready for your life to change forever?" she asked. Leo laughed. "I'm not sure I wanted to." Filming was grueling. Long hours in cold water. Dozens of takes. Cameron was merciless, barking commands through a megaphone. But Leo gave everything. He brought Jack Dawson to life, not just as a romantic hero, but as a boy who lived on borrowed time, desperate to leave a mark before the world swallowed him whole. When he whispered, "You jump, I jump," the line wasn't just about love. It was about Leo's whole philosophy: risk everything or stay invisible. Titanic hit theaters in December 1997. Nothing would be the same again. The world erupted. Fans sobbed in theaters. Teens lined up multiple times. Leo's face was plastered on bedroom walls around the globe. The film broke records. Won Oscars. Became a cultural tsunami, and Leo, he ran, from press. From cameras. From the monster he had helped create. He ducked out of award shows. Traveled under fake names. Wore hats and hoodies like armor. He was the most desired man on earth, and he never felt lonelier. Fame had become a mask. Everywhere he went, people saw Jack Dawson, but Leo was still the misfit. Still the boy from broken streets, with a heart full of chaos and contradictions. The one who talked to his mom every day. Who read obscure philosophy books at 3 a.m. Who watched documentaries instead of blockbusters. He wanted more than fame. He wanted substance. So, in the shadow of Titanic's success, while the world screamed for sequels and endorsements, Leo made a decision: he would vanish. not from acting. From everything else. He would become the misfit again. On his own terms. Part 4. Titanic and the Curse of the Heartthrob. 1997, 1999, Hollywood. The world fame isn't a crown. It's a cage. And Leonardo DiCaprio had just locked himself inside it. When Titanic erupted into the world in December 1997, Leonardo was only 23 years old. But he no longer belonged to himself. He belonged to the universe now. To the screaming teenagers outside hotels. To the paparazzi hiding in bushes. To the headlines that never got his name wrong anymore. For most actors, this would have been heaven. For Leo, it was hell dressed in designer labels. In the days following the premiere, the numbers exploded. $1 billion at the box office. Then 2. Then more. Titanic became the highest-grossing film in history. People camped outside theaters in winter just for another chance to cry when Jack sank into the Atlantic. Girls wore "I Heart Suit Leo" shirts. Magazines ran photo spreads titled "America's Prince." Studio execs called him the next Tom Cruise. The next Brad Pitt. The next everything. And through it all, Leo felt something crumbling. Inside. He hid. The phone rang day and night. Spielberg, Scorsese, Spielberg again. But Leo wasn't answering. He retreated to his home in the Hollywood Hills like a soldier returning from battle. Sleep became a weapon. The curtains stayed closed. He grew quiet, and the world grew louder. The tabloids began their hunt. They followed him to nightclubs. Zoomed in on wine glasses in his hands. Invented romances, feuds, scandals. They called him moody. Arrogant. Said the fame had gone to his head. But they didn't know the truth. The truth was he felt exposed. Not just famous, vulnerable. People didn't see Leo anymore. They saw Jack Dawson. Frozen in time. Smiling up from the bottom of the ocean. He once told his friend Lucas Haas, "I feel like I died in that movie and they're still crying at my grave." He tried to fight back, not with words, but with roles. He signed on for The Man in the Iron Mask. A period piece. Double role. Heavy dialogue. A way to prove he wasn't just a pretty face. But the critics were brutal. Bland, they wrote. Too soon after Titanic? Even when he disappeared beneath powdered wigs and prison grime, they still saw Jack, and Leo began to wonder, will they ever let me be anything else? There was a night in Paris. He slipped away from his bodyguards, wore a hoodie, ducked into a bookstore. He wandered the aisles like a ghost until he found a worn copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray. He bought it. Read it in a night. He underlined one line again and again. Behind every exquisite thing that existed, there was something tragic. He felt seen. But Hollywood wasn't patient. It wanted more Leo, more smiles, more hair flips, more heartthrob. And so, the Pussy Posse was born. It wasn't Leo's idea, not really. It started as a joke, just a bunch of young actors, musicians, artists who hated the plastic glamour of the town. They partied hard, disappeared for weekends, rolled through clubs in jeans and hoodies. Tobey Maguire, Kevin Connolly, Lucas Haas, Jay Ferguson, they were brothers in rebellion. Men at war with expectations. Leo was the unofficial leader, the quietest one, the hardest to read, but the gravitational center. The tabloids caught wind of it and branded them. The name stuck, and suddenly Leo was a party boy. But beneath the headlines, something real was happening. Leo wasn't spiraling. He was searching. He wasn't chasing fame. He was trying to escape it. He wanted to understand who he was outside the frame. So he started investing in real things. He backed documentaries on the environment, on global poverty, on the ocean. He started visiting the UN under aliases. Met scientists, journalists, activists. He sat in silence through presentations on climate data, oil pollution, endangered species. It wasn't for publicity. It was penance. He tasted what it meant to be worshipped. Now he wanted to know what it meant to be useful. Still, the movie offers came. And finally, one broke through. A script. Dark. Psychological. Directed by Danny Boyle. The beach. Leo was intrigued. It wasn't safe. It was edgy. It was about a man searching for paradise and losing himself along the way. Sounded familiar. They filmed in Thailand, hot, lush, raw. The shoot was intense. Long hours. Jungle heat. A script that evolved daily. Leo gave it his all. When the beach premiered, the backlash was swift. Critics hated it. Audiences were confused. The studio panicked. Leo? He felt relief. For once, no one was calling him perfect. But it didn't last. And no matter what he did, gain weight, scream, break things on screen, people still whispered about Jack, still printed his face with captions like, Hollywood's golden boy. Still trapped him in the box Titanic had built. And so Leo made a decision. He would disappear again. But this time, with a plan. He'd build something slower, darker, smarter. He would partner with legends. Find directors who cared about stories, not sales. He'd destroy the idea of the heartthrob, one role at a time. He would become something no one could trap again. He would become an actor. But the next step would be the hardest of all. It would require trust, risk, and transformation. It would require Scorsese, and a film about lies, blood, and the cost of power. Part 5. Scorsese and the Rebirth of an Artist. 2004, New York, Morocco, Hollywood. You don't find a mentor in Hollywood. You survive long enough until one finds you. And when Martin Scorsese called Leonardo DiCaprio, it wasn't just about a movie. It was about redemption. Leo had spent the last few years dodging everything: the spotlight, expectations, and most of all, the memory of Titanic. The roles he chose after weren't about popularity. They were trials by fire. But none of them set him free. He needed something seismic. And Scorsese was an earthquake. It began with a phone call. "I'm doing something big," Marty said, his voice crackling with New York urgency. Something raw. Something violent. Something real. Leo leaned against the kitchen counter of his rented New York loft, eyes flicking toward the skyline. "What is it?" "Gangs of New York," Scorsese said. "A war story. Civil war inside New York. Daniel Day-Lewis is in. You're the lead." Leo paused. "Why me?" There was a silence on the other end. Then, "Because I know you're not afraid of the fall." The script was massive. 19th century Manhattan, dripping in blood, power, and vengeance. Leo would play Amsterdam Valen, a young man raised by monks, returning to avenge his father's murder in a slum ruled by Bill the Butcher, Daniel Day-Lewis. But it wasn't just a revenge tale. It was about identity. Loyalty. What it cost to reclaim your name. Leo saw himself in it. The production was brutal. They filmed in Italy, building an entire replica of 5 Points from scratch. The mud was real. The blood was cold. Fights broke out on set. Fists flew. Extras fainted. The food gave half the crew food poisoning, and Daniel Day-Lewis, method to his marrow, was terrifying. He stayed in character for months. Spoke in 19th century slang. Threatened people with real knives. Leo didn't flinch. He studied Daniel. Mirrored his intensity. Watched how he used silence as a weapon. He learned to listen on screen, not just act. Scorsese pushed him harder than anyone ever had. "Stop being beautiful," Marty would bark. "Get ugly. Show me something true." And Leo did, but there was a cost. Late nights, bruised ribs, long scenes in freezing rain. Leo began to doubt himself. Was he good enough? Could he hold the screen against a legend like Day-Lewis? Then, one night after a grueling scene in which Amsterdam pleads for his life, Scorsese pulled him aside. "You know what I see?" he asked. Leo looked up, his voice raw. "What?" "A man becoming something dangerous. And beautiful." Gangs of New York was released in December 2002. It didn't sweep the Oscars. But it did something more important. It changed the way people saw Leonardo DiCaprio. And no longer just Jack. No longer the pretty boy. He was something else now. A man who could hold his own beside titans. A man who bled on screen. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. He wanted more from Marty. And Marty wanted more from him. They met in a smoky hotel bar in Midtown Manhattan. Leo still shaking off the press junkets, Marty scribbling notes on a napkin. "I've got the next one," Scorsese said. "This one's a ghost story. About a man haunted by his own brilliance." Leo raised an eyebrow. "What's it called?" Marty grinned. "The Aviator." The role was Howard Hughes. A genius. A billionaire. A film director. An aviator. And in the end, a paranoid, broken shell of a man who locked himself in a Vegas hotel, terrified of germs and shadows. It would be Leo's most complex role yet, and his most dangerous. He trained like a boxer, watched hours of archival footage, studied OCD obsessively, how Hughes washed his hands until they bled, how he fixated on phrases until they lost meaning. He worked with psychiatrists, built the tic slowly, layer by layer, not for drama, for truth. He learned to fly planes, memorized Hughes's business battles, dove into the 1920s like a man possessed, and on screen, it showed. From the dazzling confidence of a young Hughes soaring through Hollywood to the trembling recluse muttering to milk bottles in a dark room, Leo was fearless. When The Aviator premiered in 2004, critics gasped. This wasn't the Leo from Titanic. This was an actor. He won the Golden Globe. He was nominated for the Oscar. He didn't win. But it didn't matter. He was reborn. Off screen, Leo changed too. He kept the mentors close: Scorsese, Daniel, even De Niro, who had once whispered to Marty, "Keep your eye on this kid. He's got fire." He stopped chasing parties, started building his own team, agents who said no, friends who kept him grounded, advisors who steered him toward impact, not impulse. He launched his environmental foundation, spoke at global conferences, met with Al Gore, donated millions, but he never stopped acting, because now, he was finally free. Scorsese had given him more than direction. He'd given him belonging. In Marty, Leo had found the only father figure in Hollywood he truly trusted. Together, they would make more films, darker ones, better ones. But first, there was a new path. One that would plunge Leo into lies, espionage, shattered identities, and bring him closer than ever to the soul of a man he barely recognized. Part 6. The Restless Soul Behind the Eyes. 2006, 2009. Africa, Hollywood, and the edge of himself. They said he had it all: money, fame, power. But what they never saw, what the camera couldn't catch, was the man who still couldn't sleep. Because Leonardo DiCaprio wasn't chasing success anymore. He was chasing peace. And failing. After The Aviator, Leo stood on a new peak in Hollywood. Respected. Transformed. No longer a relic of Titanic or the butt of pretty boy jokes. He was a serious actor now, one who took risks and made people uncomfortable. But with that elevation came a deeper silence. A heavier kind. Because what do you do when you've proven yourself? Where do you go when the world's been handed to you, and you still feel unfulfilled? The next script came with dirt under its nails. Blood Diamond. Set in war-torn Sierra Leone, the film was brutal, an exposé of greed, child soldiers, and the blood-soaked gem trade. Leo would play Danny Archer, a Rhodesian smuggler whose heart slowly thaws as he confronts the horror he profits from. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't glamorous. It was dangerous. And Leo dove in like a man running from something. They shot in Mozambique and South Africa. It was hot, raw, real. Leo worked with ex-soldiers, studied regional dialects, adopted a clipped Zimbabwean accent that split his tongue into something foreign. He pushed his body past comfort, running through dust storms, climbing through wreckage, carrying real children through fake gunfire. But it was the eyes that haunted him. The eyes of boys holding rifles. The eyes of girls who hadn't played in years. The eyes of villagers who asked if this film would actually change anything. He didn't have an answer. He carried their faces home in his dreams. When Blood Diamond premiered in 2006, the reception was mixed. Some hailed it as a triumph. Others accused it of exploiting suffering. Leo was nominated for an Oscar, but for this role, not The Departed, his other masterpiece that year. The Academy had split him in two. But that didn't bother him. Because he was splitting himself anyway. He was living two lives now. In one, He wore tuxedos and shook hands with politicians at climate summits. In the other, he stood in front of green screens in Hollywood warehouses, pretending to die, pretending to kill, pretending to love. And both lives were beginning to blur. He became quieter in interviews, less playful, less open, not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much. He once told a friend at a Malibu bonfire, "I feel like the more I know about the world, the harder it is to act like I'm someone else." But he couldn't stop, because acting wasn't a job anymore. It was therapy, and the next therapist would be Ridley Scott. Body of Lies was a different battlefield. A post-9/11 world of CIA secrets and moral fog. Leo played Roger Ferris, a man caught between justice and deception, truth and sacrifice. They filmed in Morocco. The heat was relentless. The action never stopped. But something else happened there, something private. Leo had a breakdown on set, not dramatic, not loud, but real. He walked off during a scene, trembling, eyes wide, breath gone. "I don't know where I end and this guy begins," he whispered. He was tired, not of movies, but of living inside other people. When he got home, he stopped everything. He didn't take calls, didn't read scripts. He sat on his deck for days, staring at the ocean. He fed seagulls, watched clouds. For once, he didn't need to be anything, just Leo, just the boy who never finished school, just a man who still wore baseball caps and listened to Wu-Tang. But Hollywood doesn't pause for peace. The roles kept coming, and one stood out like a scream in the dark. Revolutionary Road. It was a trap, in a way, because it meant working with her again, Kate Winslet, for the first time since Titanic. But this wasn't Jack and Rose. This was Frank and April Wheeler, two people trapped in a suffocating marriage, choking on suburbia. Love turned toxic. It was raw, bitter, intimate. Leo almost said no. He didn't want to ruin the fairy tale. But then Kate called him, and she said the one thing he couldn't argue with. "Let's show them what it looks like when soulmates fail." The shoot was quiet but intense. No CGI. No explosions, just pain. Scenes where they shouted so hard their voices cracked. Where Leo punched walls and collapsed. Where Kate wept and refused to look him in the eye for hours between takes. It was the most vulnerable he'd ever been on camera, and the most honest. Because Frank Wheeler wasn't far from Leo himself, a man who had everything, but couldn't stop feeling like it wasn't enough. They wrapped. No Oscars came. But something more important happened. Kate hugged him at the wrap party and said, "You're finally free of him." Leo laughed. "Free of who?" "Jack," she whispered. "He's gone now. And you're finally you." That night, Leo walked through the Hollywood Hills alone. No bodyguards. No entourage. Just him. He stopped beneath a streetlight, looked at the stars, and for the first time in years, he smiled. Because maybe he wasn't cursed after all. Maybe being restless wasn't a flaw. Maybe it was the only proof that his heart was still alive. Part 7. The Rise of the Activist. 2010-2013. From dreamscapes to Davos. Before he became a man who spoke to presidents, before he stood before the UN and warned of a burning world, Leonardo DiCaprio was just a boy trying to make sense of dreams, his own, and the world's. And sometimes, the only way to wake up is to fall deeper. It started in limbo. Christopher Nolan's Inception was unlike anything Leo had ever read. A puzzle of memory, love, and identity wrapped inside science fiction, where dreams were architecture and guilt was gravity. The role was Dom Cobb, a man who breaks into others' minds while haunted by the ghost of his dead wife. Nolan looked Leo in the eyes and said, "This isn't a heist movie. It's about grief." Leo agreed to do it, but only on one condition. This character has to hurt. On set, Leo was relentless. He rewrote dialogue with Nolan late into the night, obsessed over Cobb's subconscious like it was his own. The scenes with Marion Cotillard, playing his spectral wife Mal, were brutal. There were days when they'd both leave set without speaking, drained by the weight of the story. Because Cobb's guilt wasn't fiction. It was every man who couldn't let go, every soul who clung to the past like a wound. And for Leo, it was personal. He'd never married, never settled, never stopped running. Maybe he didn't know how. When Inception premiered in July 2010, it exploded. Audiences argued about endings. Philosophers debated themes. Teens tattooed spinning tops on their wrists. But Leo? He disappeared again. Because the dreams on screen weren't enough. Now, he wanted to change the real world. His foundation, quietly started years before, went global. He wasn't just writing checks anymore. He was showing up. To the Arctic. To coral reefs. To rainforests with chainsaws humming in the distance. He met with scientists, tribal leaders, fishermen, climate refugees. He asked questions no journalist had ever posed to him. What happens when the oceans die? Where do people go when the land turns to dust? And most of all, why isn't anyone doing anything? He started documenting everything. Hired film crews. Interviewed experts. Flew in rickety helicopters to get the shot of a melting glacier. Held starving polar bears in his eyes until he couldn't breathe. He wasn't acting anymore. He was witnessing. But Hollywood kept calling. And Leo knew he couldn't change the world if he abandoned the stage that made him. So he struck a balance point: one film a year. Maximum impact. And in 2011, it was J. Edgar. Clint Eastwood directed. Leo played J. Edgar Hoover, a man twisted by ambition, paranoia, and repression. It was his darkest role yet. He aged 50 years on screen. Wore prosthetics that made his skin blister. Learned how to repress emotion with a glance. But off-screen, he was changing too. He started turning down roles that glorified violence. He began asking questions about the carbon footprint of each production. He made sustainability clauses mandatory in his contracts. People whispered he was difficult. He didn't care. He was awake now. In 2012, he stood before the Clinton Global Initiative. No script. No rehearsed charm. Just Leo. The real Leo. He spoke about extinction. About oceans suffocating in plastic. About billionaires burning the planet to feed their yachts. His voice shook. He didn't smile. This wasn't an acceptance speech. This was a warning. And people listened. But there was still rage in him. Rage at corruption. At apathy. At how some people still saw him as that guy from Titanic. So when Quentin Tarantino sent him the script for Django Unchained, Leo saw an opportunity, not to be loved, but to repulse. Calvin Candy was a monster. A smiling, southern slave owner drunk on power and violence. Leo almost said no. It was too dark. Too vile. Too far from who he was. But Tarantino said something that stuck. Sometimes, to fight evil, you have to look it in the eyes. Leo accepted. And then he became Candy. The shoot was tense. Jamie Foxx and Samuel L. Jackson had to console him between takes. Leo apologized constantly. Even cried once after a brutal monologue. But when he smashed that glass during the dinner scene, cutting his hand open and bleeding through the take, he didn't stop. Because evil doesn't stop, and neither would he. The role earned him respect, not awards. But that was fine. He was no longer hunting gold statues. He was hunting truth. And it was leading him somewhere bigger. Because in 2013, he was invited to the World Economic Forum in Davos. Leo sat beside world leaders, CEOs, climate scientists. And when he spoke, he didn't pull punches. "We are facing the greatest crisis in the history of civilization," he said, voice echoing through crystal chandeliers and $1,000 suits. "And our planet can't wait for us to become less greedy." Some people clapped. Some looked away. He didn't care. Because he finally understood something. The real dream wasn't Hollywood. The real dream was saving the world before it's too late. Part 8. Oscar, and What Lies Beyond. 2014, 2016. The Price of Survival. It began with pain. Not on screen, but in Leo's body. He couldn't feel his toes during filming. His lips turned blue in the cold. The blood on his face? Real. The hunger in his eyes? Not acting. Because The Revenant wasn't a movie, it was a test. And for Leonardo DiCaprio, it was the closest he had ever come to breaking. Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu didn't believe in comfort. He believed in truth. So when Leo signed on to play Hugh Glass, a 19th century frontiersman left for dead, He knew this wasn't going to be another survival drama. It would be a spiritual crucible. A descent into madness. And maybe, rebirth. They filmed in sub-zero Canada and the wilds of Argentina. Only natural light. No sound stages. No green screens. If it snowed too hard, they stopped. If it didn't snow at all, they waited. Crew members quit. Studios panicked. The schedule stretched. The budget exploded. But Leo, he stayed. Because there was something in that cold wilderness he needed to find. Something inside him. He slept in animal carcasses. Ate raw bison liver, for real. Crawled naked through frozen rivers. One day, the frost cut his cheek so deeply, they had to stop shooting. But Leo didn't complain. He couldn't. This wasn't about glory anymore. It was about proving he was real. That he wasn't a pretty face. Wasn't Jack Dawson. Wasn't a product. He was a man. When The Revenant premiered in 2015, critics were stunned. Leo didn't speak much in the film, but his eyes did. They spoke of rage, of loss, of nature as both enemy and God. Audiences wept, flinched, applauded, and then the whispers began. This is the one. Leo's finally getting his Oscar. He had been nominated 5 times before, and lost. Each time, he smiled on the outside. But the truth? It hurt, not because he needed validation, but because people kept using it as a weapon. As if awards proved who you were. As if he hadn't already earned it 100 times over. The 2016 Oscars came heavy with tension. Social media buzzed. Fans begged. Memes flew. But Leo stayed quiet. He sat in his seat, tux crisp, fingers clenched. And then, Julianne Moore opened the envelope. And the Oscar goes to Leonardo DiCaprio. The room erupted. He didn't. He stood slowly, walked like a soldier who had seen war. And when he took the stage, he didn't talk about himself. He talked about Earth. Climate change is real, he said. It is happening right now. It is the most urgent threat facing our entire species. People blinked. Some clapped out of politeness. But Leo didn't blink. He wasn't accepting an award. He was issuing a warning. This was his moment. And he gave it away. To the planet. To the future. To the cause that had become bigger than cinema. After the ceremony, he didn't party. He flew to Indonesia. To see endangered orangutans clinging to burnt branches. He went to the Arctic. To kneel on melting ice. He met with Pope Francis, with President Obama, with UN leaders. He didn't act for almost 2 years, because for once, acting felt smaller than what he was doing. People asked if the Oscar had changed him. It hadn't. If anything, it set him free. He didn't have to prove anything anymore. He could choose roles that challenged him. He could say no without fear. He could stand behind causes that made studios nervous. Because now, he was no longer the underdog. He was Leonardo DiCaprio. But there was a shadow in his success, something darker. Because winning hadn't healed him. It hadn't fixed the insomnia. Or the loneliness. Or the voice that whispered, "What now?" He started reading philosophy. Watched documentaries instead of blockbusters. He stayed up late walking the beach, waves licking at his feet, wondering what came next. He told a friend at a climate conference in Morocco, "Acting is like painting a portrait in a burning house." They laughed. He didn't. But the world kept pulling him back. Hollywood needed him. Activists needed him. And somewhere deep down, he needed the story to continue. Because peace, for Leo, wasn't stillness. It was movement. It was the next fight, the next frontier, the next dream. Part 9. Lovers, Loneliness, and the Search for Home. 2017-2020. Between the spotlight and the silence, it was easy to see Leonardo DiCaprio on red carpets. Sunglasses low, jaw set, camera flashes bouncing off his tailored suits. But that man wasn't the whole man. Behind the applause, behind the headlines and headlines of Leo and model, there lived a quieter, more elusive figure. A man constantly caught between the fantasy he created and the reality he craved. This is the story of what the world never saw. He lived in beautiful houses, but he rarely stayed. A beach compound in Malibu, a loft in New York, a villa in the hills. Each place was a fortress, sunlight and stone, filled with art and silence. He hosted parties, yes, but they always ended the same way, the music fading, the lights dimming, and Leo slipping off alone into a room where no one followed. His friends called him loyal. His exes called him kind and distant. Over the years, he had loved extraordinary women, some famous, some not, all smart, all drawn to the mind behind the myth. But something always got in the way. Maybe it was timing. Maybe it was the weight of his name. Or maybe, deep down, Leo was always waiting for someone who didn't see Leonardo DiCaprio, but just Leo, the boy who once lived with his mom in a broken-down apartment. The one who still woke up sweating from childhood dreams. The one who, despite everything, had never quite believed he was enough. In 2017, the world changed. Politics, climate, culture, everything was burning faster than before, and Leo? He felt it. He felt it in his chest, in his bones, in the way the wind moved across the melting ice when he stood in Greenland with a camera crew and a cracked heart. He wasn't filming a movie. He was filming the end, and when the lights went out for the day, he would lie in his tent, alone, and write. Not scripts. Not speeches. Letters. Unsent. To people he loved. To people he lost. To a future he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. But then came something unexpected. A new script. Quentin Tarantino had called. Again. It was a role unlike anything Leo had done. Rick Dalton, an aging TV star drowning in insecurity and whiskey, clinging to relevance in a world that had moved on. Leo read the script and saw something he hadn't seen in a long time, himself. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood became more than just a movie. It was memory. It was tribute. It was therapy. Brad Pitt joined as Cliff Booth, Rick's stuntman and shadow. The two men fell into rhythm immediately, on screen and off. Brad was sunshine, swagger, ease. Leo was chaos, conscience, fire. They balanced each other, grounded each other, and on screen, they told a story about men out of time, about friendship in the face of fading fame, and about how even broken people deserve redemption. The scene that broke him, Rick Dalton forgetting his lines, Leo improvised it. The rage. The self-hatred. The tears. He wasn't acting. He was bleeding. And when the cameras stopped rolling, the crew applauded not out of obligation, but awe, because for one moment the mask had slipped, and the real Leo had looked back. The film premiered at Cannes in 2019. 10-minute standing ovation, Oscar buzz, breathtaking reviews. But that night, Leo left the party early. He walked through the quiet streets of the Riviera, alone, and called his mother. He told her he missed her, that he wished he saw her more, that no statue, no critic, no legacy would ever mean more than her. She cried. He almost did too. And then, the world stopped. Pandemic. No premieres. No travel. No productions, just stillness. And for the first time in 3 decades, Leo didn't work. He sat in the stillness of his home and listened to birds. He read books that made him cry. He planted a garden. And at night, when Los Angeles went quiet, he walked under the stars with no bodyguards, no cameras, no noise. Just Leo, the man. Not the actor. In the silence, he began to question everything. Why had he run so fast for so long? Why had he been afraid of roots? Why had he mistaken freedom for escape? And then, he met someone new. Someone who didn't flinch at fame. Who loved oceans and ideas more than magazines. She challenged him. Called him out. Made him laugh so hard he forgot the weight. It wasn't a headline romance. It was private. Real. Maybe even, home. But Leo had learned not to believe in fairy tales. He didn't promise forever. He promised honesty. Presence. Growth. Because love, like the planet, needed tending, and this time, he was willing to stay long enough to learn how. The industry called again. Scripts. Offers. Money. But Leo wasn't chasing anymore. He was choosing, and the next choice would be something different, something raw, something true. Because now, he finally knew, the greatest performance of his life wasn't in front of a camera. It was learning how to live, when no one was watching. Part 10. A different DiCaprio, silent and steady. 2021, present, legacy without applause. It didn't happen overnight. There was no press release. No viral moment, just a slow retreat from the chaos. From premieres. From parties. From the version of Leonardo DiCaprio the world had written long before he ever got to write himself. In its place, silence. And within it, peace. The man who once sprinted from one project to another, who once couldn't imagine a life without constant movement, was now still, not idle, just deliberate. The DiCaprio of today wakes early. He walks barefoot in the garden behind his house. Fingertips grazing tomato vines, mint leaves, lavender stalks. He cooks. Reads. Surfs. Sometimes, he disappears entirely, days without being spotted, unreachable even to close friends. And when he reemerges, he brings with him ideas, not announcements. Hollywood calls, of course. It always does. And when it did in 2021, he answered with a film no one saw coming. Don't Look Up, a dark comedy, a satirical scream. A doomsday mirror held up to a world spiraling in denial. He didn't play a hero. He played a man unraveling. Brilliant, broken, and buried beneath bureaucracy. It was loud, chaotic, divisive, but behind the satire was something tender and terrifying. Leo had chosen this story because it wasn't fiction. It was what he saw coming, what he'd been warning about for years. In press interviews, he looked tired, but free. He spoke more of science than cinema, more of action than awards. He turned panels into protests, junkets into pledges. He didn't flirt with the camera. He pointed at glaciers, at coral reefs, at children gasping in smoke-choked cities. The world watched a man become something rare, a celebrity who no longer needed attention. A legend who had nothing left to prove. But even as he stepped into activism with more fire, Leo's art never disappeared. He just slowed it down. He became impossibly selective. And no more 10 scripts a year. No more blockbusters for the sake of being seen. He waited. He watched. And then, in 2023, he returned with Killers of the Flower Moon. A film of sorrow and silence. A story about greed, guilt, and the buried bones of American history. Martin Scorsese was at the helm again. Leo didn't play the hero. He played the man who betrayed love. The man who destroyed the very thing he was supposed to protect. And once again, audiences saw a different kind of performance. Not polished, not pretty, but painfully human. On set, he stayed behind the scenes when the cameras stopped. He helped crew members carry gear, ate lunch with extras. He told one young indigenous actor, "You don't have to change who you are to fit this world. Let this world change for you." The boy cried. So did the assistant director. Because this wasn't Jack Dawson. This was Leonardo DiCaprio, 48 years old, and finally, at peace. He never married, not because he didn't believe in love, but because, as he once told a journalist quietly, love isn't always what people think it is. Sometimes it's a moment. Sometimes it's a life. Sometimes it's letting go. But he did build something lasting, a foundation that funds global environmental work. A team of scientists, filmmakers, and activists he personally mentors. A network of schools, clean water systems, and reforestation programs most people will never know he funded. Because he doesn't want them to know. This isn't about me, he says. It never was. His mother visits often. They eat lunch by the sea. She watches him with the eyes of a woman who's seen every stage of the boy and man, from the kid who cried in auditions, to the man who refused to compromise, to the son who, in the end, found his voice not on screen, but in action. In the rare interviews he grants now, he smiles more, laughs easier. There's a softness to him that wasn't always there. And when he's asked, "What's next?" he always gives the same answer. "Whatever keeps me honest." So here he stands now, not at the top of a red carpet, not in the arms of a starlet, but somewhere quieter, rooted. He is not chasing immortality anymore. He's planting in causes. In truth. In silence. In being. A different DiCaprio. Silent, steady, still. The end.